Right, and welcome to the interview segment of Brothers in Depth. This time I'm joined here by Justin Patrick Pierce, who's an author, mentor, and relationship consultant. Before I say anything else, Justin, welcome. Thanks for being here.
It's great to see you, James. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm doubly excited to have you here because I I love the work that you and London put out in the world. Your book, Playing with Fire, the courses, the information that you put out there. But I've also had the experience of being in a coaching container with you. And um, I don't know if you have this, I'm sure you do. Because Megan and I work in the same space, we're really fucking picky. Like, if you make pizzas, you're going to be picky about the pizza you're making. And if you're a movie critic, you're going to be doubly critical about any movie you're going to. So, whatever you know well, you tend to have a higher standard. And we were so stoked to find you two. And the depth of your own practice and also the way you could disseminate that and the practices that you gave Megan and I being awesomely helpful and deeply profound. Um, and I guess my first question is this: when we were looking for a relationship coach in the tantra intimacy space, it's incredibly rare. Like like trying to find a unicorn to find a couple that are monogamous. It's even rarer to find a couple that are monogamous that have a child. And I'm wondering why you think that is. And I'm wondering why you've chosen this path of radical monogamy in a space that's kind of known for being more open and free.
Well, thank you for everything that you shared there, James. And it's been such an honor to know you and Megan and work with the two of you. Um, and I think all men and women are at different levels in terms of spiritual growth, in terms of what they're ready for, what they're ready to know, what they desire to know, in the ways they're ready to grow. And something that I've observed about this space of sacred sex is what draws a lot of folks into it is very much the erotic,
Mm.
is very much multiple orgasms. What's that? Tantric sex. It sounds like your lovemaking becomes sacred, spiritual, but also kind of like a drug, like an ayahuasca trip. When you have sex, you're infused with this kind of MDMA that naturally occurs because you know how to cultivate your sexual energy to such a degree. And all of that is true. All of that is attainable. And so when a lot of people step into this conversation or into this world, they're kind of looking for that. They're chasing this kind of experience. And they could do it in different ways. They either approach sex kind of like a drug, where this feels exciting, erotic, and let me get all of these flavors and tastes because I just can't have enough. How many different sexual experiences can I have? And I was more in that camp, myself and coming from a family of alcoholism and addiction. I very much have that in my biology, like an addictive nature. So the idea of, ooh, extreme pleasure, intensified pleasure and sexual experiences. Yum, yum, yum. Give me, give me, give me. I want that. That's one way that a lot of people get pulled into the world. Another way a lot of folks get pulled into this world is they've suffered deeply because they've had a lot of relationships that didn't work well for them, or sex is a painful activity or a painful subject for them. And they feel not enough. They feel lacking. They feel inadequate. And it's crushing them, and they really want to transform and do something about it. They want to master that domain of their life, their sexuality. As we mature in the practice, we start to learn that those were basically just like entry points. And as we get deeper into this body of work, real spiritual liberation becomes possible. profound spiritual maturity in developing ourselves as compassionate, unconditionally loving, trustworthy human beings, and feeling what it is to embody that and be that person in your life. It gives a different flavor to the why to study this body of work. And that embodiment of compassion, of real liberation, of real equanimity is such a higher high than any orgasm could ever give you or any sexual experience could ever give you. And for the rare ones who hang out in this conversation long enough to feel past their wounds and their cravings and step into real spiritual liberation, that's what I feel the work is ultimately about. And that's what I practice. That's what Londin practices. And that's what we teach. But that deeper conversation isn't necessarily as appealing to a mass market and a wider audience. Because the mass market wants to hear, how can I have multiple orgasms? How can I have more ecstatic sex? How can I? So while those elements are part of it, my position is that they're a very small part of it. And if you get stuck in those beginner points thinking that's what it is, you just continue to create and feed this kind of craving where too much is never enough.
Mm.
Now you crave where you once craved a confident man, now you crave a conscious man. Where you once craved a beautiful, playful woman, you now crave a erotically surrendered goddess. But the craving remains there. You've just replaced it with new ideas, subtler ideas. And this work, the ultimate goal is to liberate us from those cravings. And it's a dangerous path because we're using our desire and our sexuality to find liberation. And that's why our book's called Playing with Fire, because it's the most dangerous spiritual path. Because you're diving right into craving and desire, the two things that create the most bondage for any human being on the planet. How do you alchemize that into true spiritual awakening? So those are the 2 points of view that I think this body of work touches upon. And the majority of events and practitioners, I think, live in that first domain that I was describing. But as we sexually evolve beyond that, to release desires and cravings, something else entirely becomes available, which is far more ecstatic and a profound way to live.
Mm. Beautiful. Well, the name of the series is Brothers in Depth, and the idea is to peel back layers. And I love the what you're suggesting there. It's almost like peeling back the onion, right? What's the first thing you're chasing? Well, maybe it's new experiences, maybe it's sexuality, it's eroticism, and from there you have the beautiful girl, but then you have the conscious one, and then you have the erotically free one, and you know, I want to spend a lot of our time talking about a non-ejaculatory practice, but while we're here, what strikes me is the false promise of freedom that lies down the pathway of more women and more things. And as a man, I know I crave freedom deep within my bones, lack of obligation and freedom. And I know a lot of men do and are halfway in a relationship because that part of them is still pulling out towards more freedom. Or they just don't want to enter into a relationship, especially in the conscious sexuality space, because it's so much freer to move from partner to partner to partner, to never have to face that deeper conversation, that deeper level, but also never get to that deeper level of freedom. And I wonder if you could say a couple of words about that mistaken idea of freedom and how you perceive true freedom from a relationship that's deep and monogamous.
It's a really powerful question, and it's an inquiry that I was in for years because I believed I was the kind of guy that couldn't possibly commit to one woman. I had to date many women, and I dated about a dozen simultaneously at one point in my life. And I don't say that to impress anyone. I don't have pride in that whatsoever. Um, I say that because sometimes it takes us experiencing that to really realize that's not freedom. That's not happiness. That's not living at your greatest depth and feeling most purposeful and in alignment with who you want to be and who you need to become before you die. That's not what I found there in that. I would wake up in bed with someone and look over and think to myself, what is this person doing in my bed? And the feeling of it no longer, the kind of play and excitement and thrill of it had run out, and there was an emptiness. But I also became aware that the way I was behaving was not only hurting others, but also hurting myself. And it's the it's the gift. It's just like if we've never had a lot of money before, we maintain this idea that if we had a lot of money, we would be happier or we would feel freer, we would be liberated. But there's a gift for those who have many millions and billions of dollars because they know better than anyone else. It does not bring happiness or freedom. In fact, it tends to bring more misery, more misery. And that's a gift because you realize liberation is not in more money. Liberation is not in more trips traveling around the world. Liberation is not in more sexual partners or sexual experiences. None of those lead to liberation. None of those lead to liberation because at their core, there's a searching. And in every search, there's an avoidance of what is. And if our activity at the fundamental level of our being is, this moment is not enough, I'm not enough, this experience is insufficient, I need more, that's the source of our suffering. The source of our suffering and our feeling imprisoned is our resistance to what is. This is what spiritual insight is entirely about, is to concentrate the mind so deeply and feel so directly into our own experience that we can actually observe what resistance is. Resistance to the present moment, resistance to what is. What is that? The only thing you're bumping up against is yourself. There's nothing else to bump up against. When you feel imprisoned or you feel resistance, the only thing you're actually bumping up against is you. But from that position, it doesn't feel that way. From that point of view, when we feel imprisoned, we feel it's my external situation. It's that partner. It's my bank account. It's this house. It's that shit car. It's this situation. It's those taxes. And we point outside to all of these objects to say, these are my prison. Not realizing that, no, you are your own prison. This is part of the awakening process. When we start to recognize our resistance is our bondage, we start to realize that once we remove resistance and we step into life fully and there's no resistance anymore, that's freedom. And so what do I mean by that? I resisted committing to one person for a long time because it felt like a loss of freedom. But I wasn't free with all of those partners. I was in my own prison of never enough. No matter how much sex I had or how many partners I had, I never felt satisfied. It never felt like it was enough sex. It never felt like it was enough partners. I could have had 1,000 partners. It wouldn't have felt enough. Because what I was addicted to was the craving of more, of more, of more, new experience, and totally dissatisfied with whatever the present moment was. incapable of intimately being with the present moment. So, as we explore sacred sex, one of those things we're learning is not to chase these orgasms or these fantasies, but to learn how to become perfectly intimate with the right now moment such that there's no resistance in us. And the moment we can taste this present moment without any resistance, in that moment we are free. In that moment, we taste liberation for the first time, even if it's momentary. But through these practices, we ultimately cultivate, rather than judgment of the moment, the capacity to be with the moment. But then that turns into the capacity to love the moment and what is, to look life in the eyes and say, I love you, to look the moment in the eyes and say, I love you. And there's a profound surrender. And it's only through that surrender that real liberation is tasted. So my own personal process was incremental in getting to this point, but it started with recognizing that I was miserable with all those partners. I'm going to fully commit with one. I'm going to be all in. I'm going to step all into this thing and fully commit. And ironically, I found greater freedom and liberation in that full commitment than I ever found keeping my supposed freedom by having all options open.
Yeah, beautifully said. I remember in my own commitment with Megan, and before that, I had similar story to yours. Um, I don't think it was ever 12 or me time. It's similar, searching for some form of happiness in the women that I got or the success that I got. And with Megan, she really called me towards a level of commitment that I hadn't had before. And I could see the part of me that just wanted to fucking run and get out of it, because stepping into it was the first time I really understood this saying falling in love, because it felt like there was no bottom. It felt terrifying, actually, to be that open and that fully in. Um, but once the decision was made, similar to you, it had a deep, deep sense of freedom. And before we move on, I wonder if you can speak to, this idea of all you're ever rubbing up against is yourself. And once you can realize that and find equanimity, that's a taste of freedom. The benefits and challenges of having a partner to do that with, because it's no longer just you sitting by yourself. There's somebody else that's helping press all those buttons for growth.
Yes. And accelerating that growth. Accelerating that growth. When we start the spiritual process, we start by working on ourself. This notion of a self. What is a self? Well, it stops and starts at this layer of skin right here. And everything inside is me, and everything outside is someone or something else. And so we begin working within the framework of our own body and this thing we call self, our own identity. And we start to work with our feelings and our thoughts and our physicality, our biology, our health, our wellness. And we take on this project of trying to come into balance and in self love and healing with this universe that is very insular. And just as we turn our attention here, we notice, whoa, there's a lot of work to be done. I could work on this forever. And you start to develop the ability to be with yourself or modulate yourself. And you notice how difficult that is, how challenging that is to maintain equanimity in relationship just to you and your own experience.
Mm.
The moment another human being walks into the picture, Now you have to deal with their nervous system, their wounds, their thoughts, their emotions, their health, all of that that comes with it, their family history, their genetics. You suddenly, especially an intimate relationship, because if that person is just some random person, even if a client, you know what it's like to work with clients? A client can step in with all of that, and you're not going to be nearly as affected by all of that. You'll be able to hold space for them compassionately, very easily, but you make that person your intimate partner. Oh, oh man, why is this so much harder? Is because your intimate partner is actually an extension of your own body mind. The moment you make love, your body minds entangle and infuse in a deeper way. So the mood or the thought pattern or the sensations in your lover's body actually become more and more your own direct experience the longer you're together. The wall, so to speak, the illusory wall between your two bodies begins to dissolve and it becomes less and less and less. Depending on how deep your intimate relationship is, you'll notice that dissolving more so than others. Some people will be in an intimate relationship and not even ever feel the dissolving between their two bodies.
Mm.
If you're doing sexual yoga practices and practicing regularly with that person, those walls come down completely to the very point where if your partner has a stomach ache, you'll feel their stomach ache. You get a headache, your partner will feel your headache. That's not like, that's just not some like kind of nonsense. That's very real. That is a very real experience. You'll notice that you get to the point where you can't hide thoughts from each other anymore. The whole psychic mind field is completely open and you can see and read each other. And that feels very scary because me being a person who was very sneaky and secretive and untrustworthy when I was young, the idea of someone could read my thoughts or know what I'm thinking and feeling in any moment, I don't want that. That sounds terrible. Who would I have to become to be able to live that way? I'd have to step into so much integrity. I'd have to really let parts of my ego and my craving and my selfishness die to really sign up for that kind of dynamic. I don't want to be that exposed. That would have been my initial experience. But now that I live in that experience, there's a liberation. The part of you that used to feel it had to hide is no longer having to hide. You're fully clean and clear. And you start to feel like the man you need to become before you die. You start to feel like just your life, your existence is purposeful in and of itself because there's no insidious parts of you that are constantly trying to selfishly manipulate someone or take control or distort your own reality or telling you you're a failure. All of that kind of dissolves in this beautiful union you share between you and your partner. So once that field opens up, it can feel very overwhelming because now you're not just dealing with one body mind, you're dealing with two. That the more we practice and the more the separation between those two dissolve, that's the real awakening experience. And all of the spiritual teachers who've taught meditation, yoga, all of these philosophies are all about realizing the oneness in all of us, the non separateness. What do they mean when they say that? We can all kind of imagine it and think it, but to experience it directly is a completely different thing. And to experience it directly is the true realization of freedom and of love.
Have you seen the mid-90s movie What Women Want with Mel Gibson?
I have not, but I saw like commercials of it when I was much younger and it first came out, so I have a sense of what it was about, but I never saw it.
I just had an image of that when you're describing the mind reading. He was able to read women's mind, and his journey was, as soon as that happened, to be able to step into a newer, better version of him and leave aside his disintegrity. And I mention this because it's almost an aside, but speaking for myself and my own sneaky and disloyal past, I find because I know that part of myself and I've chosen different, that it's much more trustworthy than a man who's never been down that route and doesn't know that part of himself and had the chance to choose different. So I appreciate you speaking to that. And I think it's so easy when you're in the role that you're in as a teacher or mentor and you have this very deep, powerful relationship and you guys like, I don't even, it's not a power couple because that's also a mid 80s, mid 90s uh, connotation, but it's like a very powerful couple in the magic sense, like the magic of power. Like you're a very powerful couple to come across as perfect in getting it all right. It's great to know that there's a, and it's much deeper than this, but the past there behind it there, to which you've had to make decisions to get to the place that you are now.
Absolutely.
Um,
And there's one key decision that I wanna share with you that I think it's important for everyone to know on this call, and, London and I were practicing this work together for 7 years before we ever thought about teaching or facilitating,
honest.
because we didn't want to teach and facilitate. We were so happy with our relationship and what we created. We knew that by letting others in, that could create complications. And, oh, wow, you're gonna let people into this world, and now you have to present yourself as being these people in this relationship, and the added stress that would psychically put on the dynamic, and how easily people could fall into the trap of being like, "Well, I have to appear perfect," even on the days when my relationship might feel pretty shitty to me, or I might not be at my best. And we're gonna put this relationship under a spotlight. And I've watched couples suffer that, where on stage they'll look one way, and the moment they step behind the stage, it's the complete opposite. Where one partner's teaching on stage, presenting these ideas, and the other partner's sitting in the audience listening, going, "Yeah, you don't practice that." And so London and I made a very clear decision before we opted into writing our first book and teaching together, which was we are never going to present ourselves as something that is not absolutely true with who we are and what we experience. We are never going to create a facade or paint a picture that is untrue to our experience that makes us feel like we have to hide or hold up some facade to keep it all together, because that will destroy the thing that we love, which is our authentic bond, our authentic
Mm,
relationship.
yeah. Well, yeah, I've seen that in Nicole's too. And honestly, some of Megan and I's favorite parts was just hearing about some of your fights. But then, but then, and this is key, there's a couple of things to stand out, but then the key is how you repaired them. And I remember hearing this great piece of advice. I don't know if it's true, but it has a lot of truth. Someone said the most important thing that you can teach as a parent is repair. And I love that as an idea. And I think there's a huge part of that in a relationship. Whether it's the most important thing, that's why I'm not sure. But it's massively important. And one of the main tools that you present in your book, and that Meg and I still practice. We literally today we were practicing it because we're going to a tight spot. Is this practice of I feel. We won't get into it today, but those of you listening, check out the book, listen to the other work of Justin London. But it's an incredibly powerful tool. And I remember we came to one of our sessions with you guys, and we'd had this shit show of a week where we were just out of resonance. There's a lot of arguments coming up. There was just, that time when you're just not clicking in. And then before the call, we'd managed to come back using this tool, I feel, a couple of times to turn it around from butting heads into equanimity and then into polarity. And we had this beautiful lovemaking session. But both of us still felt like we wanted to bring it to you and be like, this is what happened. And we explained the whole thing, and you're like, great. sounds like it worked really well. It was like, "Oh, yeah, that's right. This isn't work to take away the problems. This isn't work that waves a wand. No matter what and who you are and how much work you've done, there's always gonna be issues, there's always gonna be fights, there's always gonna be arguments. The key is how that can be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but how that can be turned around, brought back to center, and made into some how it can be alchemized, made into some magic."
That's it. Alchemized into love. Every emotion can be alchemized into love. And the more skillful you become, the more you realize that to be true. And you stop feeling fear in relationship to emotions. You know, something that London and I talk about all the time is through our practice and what we've developed is we don't think of any emotion as negative. I know there's a lot of people have a mindset, oh, these are negative emotions. These are positive emotions. It's negative to be sad. It's negative to be angry. It's negative to be this. I shouldn't be feeling those things. I shouldn't be thinking those. Let me go for a walk. Let me make myself happy. Let me distract myself so I'm not feeling this feeling. And we get this false sense that we're able to control what we feel. And that's not true at all. We cannot control what we feel. We have a feeling and then we react to that feeling. We can control how we react to what we feel, but we cannot control what we feel. We can control how we react or respond to what we feel, but we cannot control what we feel. Your partner says something hurtful to you, you feel hurt by what they said. You can't control that you felt hurt. You can't just be like, oh, well, I just decide not to feel hurt by that. No, you feel hurt first, and then you can react and say, I'm going to choose to ignore that, or I'm going to say a joke now, I'm going to distract myself. But the instance of feeling, we have no control over. There's a lot of folks who suddenly would feel disempowered by that idea. Like, oh no, I can't control what I feel. Or would argue with it and say, that's not true. I can totally control what I feel. But when we begin to submit and surrender to that idea, and we give our body mind permission to feel what it feels, that's where equanimity begins. As we stop trying to sort through our feelings and experiences, searching, as I described earlier, because you're dissatisfied with what this moment is. You're resisting what is. You're resisting the feeling that is. And in that resistance, you create your own suffering. You feel trapped. You feel imprisoned. You feel alone in your feelings. You feel like no one sees your feelings or understands you because you reject your own feelings. It starts by you rejecting your own true feeling and then hiding it or cloaking it or making it wrong. That's where the abandonment starts. It starts with you. That's where the resistance starts. It starts with your own resistance. So as we give ourselves permission to feel the full range of emotions, from sad to upset, to feeling like we're not enough, to feeling lost, to feeling joy, ecstatic, happiness, satisfaction, fulfillment, whatever, curiosity, excitement, they're all just emotions. And every one of these emotions, you can run love through them. And that's why in my body of work, love is not an emotion in my body of work. Some people think of love as an emotion. Love is not an emotion. Love is a quality of free feeling attention, of full consciousness, full presence, pressed through as the presence of love bliss, of consciousness itself. Consciousness is love. That love bliss can project itself through any emotion, and it does. Because think about it this way. Can you be crying and sad and loving at the same time? Of course you can. When you lose a loved one, you're crying, but that crying is an act of love. Can you express anger through love? Of course you can. If someone's trying to harm your family or attack your family and you're protecting them, that protection comes from love. So you generate a force that's strong enough to protect those you love. It comes from love. So love is more than an emotion. And we have the capacity to bring love through every emotion that we feel. And it starts by bringing love to the emotions within ourselves. And then we develop the strength to bring that love to the emotions in our partner, no matter what they're feeling. And the true embodiment of equanimity here, and this is a practice I've done for many years now that I created through this body of work, is whatever's arising, it's just the simple, I see you, I feel you, I love you. I see you, I feel you, I love you. Being aware of the feeling, being sensitive to it and willing to feel it. And then I love you, which is the full body embrace of that emotion, not needing it to change or go anywhere. And it's that activity that creates a liberation where the resistance dissolves. And then we're able to find real peace and relationship with the present moment and what is.
Mm, beautiful. And I want to say, you know, a lot of the men, I think, would have been in a similar situation to what I was around emotions, in that, you talk about pushing away emotions and not feeling emotions. It almost wouldn't have translated to me a number of years ago. So I just want to say what that can look like. It's way easier to recognize the symptoms than the emotion for a lot of men. So what that can look like is being overly busy all of the time. What it can look like is watching a lot of porn. What it can look like is numbing out with food. What it can look like is um, alcohol, drugs. These are the symptoms that suggest that there's something that's being pushed away in the moment. And perhaps it's a sideways segue, but the practice that I want to focus on with the rest of my time together of non ejaculatory practice is something that will bring up a lot for men that haven't practiced before. It's like a pressure cooker where all of those ways to numb away from feeling tend to be amplified up as this extra energy runs through your body. Before we get there, um, can you give I, I remember being on a retreat almost a decade ago, and the teacher, someone said, "Oh, can we talk a little bit about a non ejaculatory practice?" And they just started talking about it. And I went, "Non ejaculatory, what?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, that's when you don't ejaculate and my brain's like, but that isn't that the point? Isn't the point of sex to come? Like, isn't that why you do the thing?" Like, it was such a foreign concept to my brain. And in the worlds that we move in, it's not foreign at all. But for the vast majority of men, most of the men listening to this, it'll be just as foreign. So for those men, can you give the overview of what the practice is, and then we can move to something more granular from there?
Sure. What the biology naturally wants to do in sex for men is you stimulate the genitals and all of the attention, all of the energy moves to the genitals, particularly in the head of the penis. And then you penetrate a partner, you create that sexual friction, and you just keep building that sexual friction until the point the pleasure is amplified. And then there's a release where you feel a down and out of the energy pours out of you. And then once you ejaculate, you feel depleted. And what's interesting is prior to ejaculating, you feel this tremendous force to bond with your partner, to embrace your partner, to touch your partner, to wine and dine your partner, to care for your partner. The moment you ejaculate, it's like that, like a circuit breaker just shuts off, and your biology almost wants nothing to do with your partner at that point. You want to roll over and go to sleep, watch television. You don't want to be touched. You just want to go have a snack. Like you disconnect from intimacy entirely. And it kind of creates like this Jekyll and Hyde experience for men. Like men are very bipolar in intimacy because of this function in their biology. It's like before they ejaculate, man, they love you. They will say and do anything. The moment they've ejaculated, it's like, I don't want nothing to do with you. What is that? So it creates this push pull in sexuality that leads to a lot of suffering for the intimate partner. But also for the man, he will feel depleted in this process and he'll be losing his vital life force energy each time that he ejaculates. Now, this won't be very noticeable when he's in his teens, might not even be so noticeable in the 20s. But as he hits his 30s, moves to 40s and 50s, it becomes more and more noticeable. You ejaculate, you are exhausted, like you lose something in the process of ejaculating. So, one of the key reasons why we do this is to learn how to recirculate vital life force energy through the body. When your genitals are stimulated, you stimulate the endocrine system. And this is going to relate different biochemicals. It's going to stimulate your nervous system. You're going to feel tingly in your body. Your eyes get a little brighter. You feel a little revved up, right? Just by stimulating the genitals, you'll feel this kind of release as you become more and more sensitive to it. Once you stimulate the nervous system and you begin to develop that, your practice is to stop touching stop self-pleasuring, stop moving towards ejaculation, rest, take a few breaths, go about your day without ejaculating. And now learn to keep that sexual energy moving, circulating through your nervous system through the whole day. If you begin to develop this practice, you'll notice your energy levels are higher. You'll notice you're not going to need as much caffeine. And what the practice is, again, it's not just becoming a celibate monk where you don't touch your genitals at all. It's a practice of stimulating the genitals, creating blood flow, stimulating the endocrine system, breathing the energy through the body, and then carrying that energy into your day. That's going to create more vitality in your nervous system. And that's one of the foundational entry point reasons why we would engage in this practice.
Yeah, I remember the first time I put the feeling of an ejaculation hangover the next day to ejaculation when I started out, whatever it was, a decade ago, and just being like, "Oh, that's what that feeling was." Because it's a feeling, at least in my body, being scooped out, like, just waking up with very little motivation for the day, like just needing coffee and something to, like, get me through the morning to kinda get into the day until my system built back up. But because it was never part of the conversation, because it was never part of my education until that point, no one had ever given me this pathway to make. And I don't know how long it would be that I would use ejaculation basically as a sleeping pill, right? So I'd be stuck in this loop of waking up, feeling hollowed out, whatever, scooped up, and not realizing where it came from. And all the men that I've worked with in this realm, when they have this, it's the same thing. Like, oh shit, which is why I think it's so valuable to talk about. And when we spoke in the beginning, you said that you had some, I think you used the words more controversial views on non-ejaculatory. Was it controversial or less than regular was the feeling I got? What are some of the less normal views on the non-ejaculatory practice you have?
Yeah. Well, if we go back to the original conversation about our resistance to what is, so much of playing with non ejaculatory orgasms or indulging in sacred sex, there's a craving we develop. There's a craving for pleasurable sensation. There is a feeling of, I don't like the way I'm feeling. I want to feel differently. So that rejection of what is to chase a feeling of sensation creates bondage for a person because now you're just building this craving deep in the nervous system. So, in many ways, developing kind of a sexual practice is antithetical to spiritual liberation because you're actually playing the game of chasing sensations, chasing the next experience, chasing sensation. So you go, oh, wow, multiple orgasms, that sounds wonderful. Let's do that. And you begin practicing it. And then you get to the point where you say, when I ejaculated, that used to be pleasurable. But now when I'm not ejaculating, there's a different kind of pleasure. And now I'm starting to have these full body orgasms, and these are even more pleasurable. And I can have them more again and again and again, and I feel vibrant in my day. This is wonderful. This is wonderful. Such a different way to experience my sexuality in life. And all of that is wonderful. But at the same time, that continues to be a kind of craving or addiction to experience or sensation. And that's why the book's called Playing with Fire. Because how do we walk a path of true liberation and at the same time engage so deeply in these sensations and experiences that create craving deep in the psyche and deep in the sexual self? So, the ultimate goal walking this path, if we want it to be for spiritual liberation, has to come from a complete equanimity in relationship to sexual activity, non attachment to whether we orgasm or not, non attachment to how pleasurable it feels. And then the moment becomes about something else, which is about celebrating love and being radically drawn into the present moment. So we can taste this present moment completely and fully. And we can use our sex drive to actually help facilitate that experience because our sex can pull us radically into the present moment. That's one of the reasons why sex is so pleasurable for everyone. You don't need to be a practitioner to experience the wondrous delight of sex. Because what does sex do? It stimulates your body so much that it pulls you out of your thinking mind. It puts you in your body and it takes you out of the past and future. It draws you exclusively into the right now moment so you can actually taste and feel the present. And even just a few minutes of that feels like ecstasy. Take me out of the past and future and pull me into this present moment. So, sex has that power, and everyone benefits from that. But as we engage with this, we also have to be mindful not to become addicted to it, where now we're becoming more craving, more imbalanced, because we have cultivated this kind of obsession with sex and orgasm. It doesn't matter if it's an external orgasm or an internal orgasm. It doesn't matter if it's 1 or 20. Pleasure is pleasure. Chasing sensation is chasing sensation. So we have to understand these energies we're working with for the sake of knowing our ultimate why or our ultimate goal. Am I just wanting to make myself addicted to some other subtler, more spiritual substance? Or am I actually looking for liberation and wanting to integrate my sex into something that truly becomes a gift as the way that I live and I love my partner so I could feel in alignment and integrity with the man that I am and who I will be when I die? And that's the alchemy. And that's where we bring these two worlds of desire and equanimity together in one mold, which is a paradox in and of itself. But when we understand that paradox, we harness the secret of sacred sex and what it's ultimately about. Desireless desire, desireless desire.
Mm, yeah. You know, there's so many there's so many benefits to this practice for the men that are just listening in. You know, you mentioned already that feeling of being attracted and wanting to be magnetized towards your partner before ejaculating. That exists in your body. You know, the longer the practice goes on, the more intense that can become. But there's so many couples we speak to, it's a lack of attraction. That's a big part of the problem. Well, yeah, it's one of the great ways to work with it. Another thing to look at, I remember this study, most women don't experience some of the deeper states of orgasm to something like 45 minutes on average, and most men ejaculate in 3.5 minutes. So this practice obviously helps with the longevity. Um, And then there's this other piece that you're bringing in about the desire, which is a mind bending thing if you've always focused on ejaculation. Because even just that first level of chasing ejaculation, that's the first level of desire. Forget about the later stages of non ejaculatory orgasm and multiple orgasms and in higher states of consciousness and sexuality. Just that first state, it's interesting to think about because once you take away, the goal of orgasm for a man, the question then becomes, what's there? If I'm not focused on that, what am I focused on? And my experience is anytime I take the focus off pleasure, orgasm, whatever it might be, and relax, then the effect on my partners immediately immediate and pronounced. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, I think that's all very well said. And then as the alpha partner who's sitting there wanting to see your intimate partner open up, see your intimate partner splay open with desire, with interest, with hunger, with play, with tussle. If you want to see that in your intimate partner, then you must cultivate that discipline to not let your urge to orgasm drive you forward, to lean in too soon, to touch too soon. When you just learn to lean back and breathe and open that space, you feel your desire wanting to have sex, wanting to lean in, and you don't lean in, but you breathe with that energy and let it cook you from the inside. You let it bake you, and you watch your intimate partner open up into a kind of ecstasy and pleasure that you've always wanted to see in an intimate partner. You've always wanted to watch your intimate partner in front of you open in that way, but you never got to see it because your sex would have you lean in too soon. So as you lean back, as you're describing and watching your partner open, you suddenly realize this is profound and this is actually what I want. I
Mm.
want to sit in front of a partner who is squirming and writhing and begging for me and feeling that love and that connection and watching her surrender to me, feeling her trust my presence, which allows her to surrender so deeply. Now, this is what sex is. And we start to realize, holy crap, I wasn't having sex before. Before, I was just masturbating with people's bodies. I would just hop on a person, focus on their nipple, or close my eyes and fantasize about someone else and just grind and create friction until I ejaculated. I was masturbating with people's bodies. Now we enter this domain, and suddenly we're making love. We're drawn into the experience with such presence, such ecstasy, that now sex takes on a totally different meaning. And there's a lot of men who I've worked with in the past who say, Justin, when you would talk about how sex is more than just a penis going in a vagina, like I had no idea what the hell you were even talking about. And then you would say, I now realize that every moment of interaction with my intimate partner is sex, is intimacy. And when I start becoming conscious of that and treating it that way, our sex and our intimacy just is permeating every moment of our lives. It's just this constant experience of intimacy and love and play. And at any moment, we could hop on each other and penetrate and make love, or we could just occupy the same space, but that fire of sexual interest, that fire of delight stays lit because you've stopped ejaculating into a sock or down the drain. You've learned to circulate that in your body with a discipline. And that's what opens up in any intimate relationship that we start to practice this skill. But the other secret to that, as you've discovered, as I've discovered, is when you do that in a committed relationship where your partner can feel completely safe in your commitment, in your certainty that you want to be there, she can surrender and open more. It's the depth of your commitment that allows her to surrender and open because she can trust at that level. If she's not certain you're going to be there tomorrow, she could only open so deep. She can only surrender so deeply. If she's not sure whether she's going to be your partner tomorrow, she can still have sex with you. You can still have a great time. But the surrender that I'm talking about, the surrender that I know you know, can only be found when that commitment is completely there and the trust is there, such that you unlock your partner's body and heart so deep that when she opens to you, she surrenders open, and it's like a supernova is shining upon you. And then you make love to that. That is sacred sex. And that space is held sacred between the two of you, not just in that present moment, but it penetrates all of space and time, creates a kind of certainty and everlasting love That is the essence of what becomes possible for us when we cultivate this discipline and use our sex to help us become the man we must before we die. That all becomes very real and possible. And then at that moment, it's another layer of no longer feeling imprisoned by life. The feeling that this is not enough or I'm not enough dissolves in that light. And then your relationship is enough. You are enough. Your life is enough. You desire nothing outside of the present moment. The present moment is radiant and full with ecstasy and bliss because you've learned how to make love to the right now.
Mm. It reminds me a little how, often we'll work with couples or speak to couples and we're like, oh yeah, if we were feeling good and happy, then we would have more sex, then we would make love more. Not realizing it's the other way around. You make love and then you feel better, to put it bluntly. Um, but what I love about what you're saying is uh, it it takes everything further. It's not just, yes, if you're making love more regularly, then there's less arguments, there's less friction, there's less crunchiness between the two of you. But if you're making love in this way that you're speaking of, then it opens up endless possibilities in your life that you actually get to walk through the world more differently. Because each time you get to touch on either a part of yourself that was unaware or a part of your partner and find opening through that, or connect into that other thing that comes through. And that creates massive indirect change. So I love the idea of sexuality in this type of container as a practice to expand and evolve in life, which is, I guess, the core of your work, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we describe it in Playing with Fire as what is this work really about? At the end of the day, how do we define awakening? Becoming a more love conscious human being.
Mm.
Just become a little more conscious, a little more loving. That is the process of awakening.
Mm. Love it, brother. And I know we're coming up on time. I'll just say for those men or women that are listening, but all of the things that have been spoken about, no matter how esoteric or far out that some of them may sound, are absolutely, definitely possible and are totally life altering and changing. And this won't be true for every man, but I know the practice of a non-ejaculatory practice is a really great starting point. If you want to go, how am I going to engage in sacred sexuality? How am I going to enter into this realm that is so vast? Well, a great practical step is to look at a non-ejaculatory practice. And Justin on his blog has a really great blog post on it with a 21-day challenge, if I remember correctly.
Correct. It's called Multiple Orgasms for Men, Prolonging Lovemaking and Bypassing Ejaculation. And it's a tutorial on my website if you just check out the blog section. And you can just read through it. There's a 21-day challenge. And I would recommend anyone who's interested in getting started reading the article and try for 21 days. And then if you need to hit the reset button and ejaculate, go for it. And then just try another 21 days. And then you can hit the reset button. And it's like, what I really want to encourage men to do is I think men get really discouraged when they try and do this because it's really hard. It's it's a really hard adaptation to make in your biology. And I don't think a lot of people really successfully ever achieve it. I've worked with a lot of great men, very serious practitioners over the years. And when it comes to this topic, um, they're a little dumbfounded and discouraged because of just how difficult it can actually become. So that's real. But what I want to encourage for anyone is don't let that discourage you. So if you can just develop the ability to not ejaculate for a week and you only do it once a week, awesome, and then do another week, and then try 2 weeks, and then see if you could do 3 weeks and 4 weeks. And the goal isn't in my body of work, the goal is not to never ejaculate again. There's certainly Taoist traditions that would kind of encourage that type of practice. That's not the practice that I do, is to never ejaculate again. The practice is to be mindful of your energy levels and your sex levels and to regulate them intelligently. To take care of your body. You don't need to go to the gym every single day, but you got to go enough where you're not feeling sluggish and getting out of shape. You want to take care of yourself and find balance in your nervous system. So, the one way to get into balance is you're probably already out of balance a bit with your ejaculating. So, start by refraining from ejaculating. You can still self pleasure for a few minutes to get you aroused. Then take some deep breaths, do some breath work, move that energy through breath, go about your day. Do some simple self pleasuring, do breath work, go about your day, and feel that energy build in your nervous system. And you'll know you're making progress when you can feel the energy shift immediately after you practice. And then you can start to feel the shift all throughout your day. And then when I really first started getting serious about this practice, I noticed after about 7 or 8 days, I had so much energy, I couldn't sleep at night anymore. And I was only getting about 3 or 4 hours of sleep because there was so much energy in my body. And at that moment, you think, oh no, something's wrong. I'm irritated. I better ejaculate. Like you said, it's a sleeping pill. Let me ejaculate so I could just get some sleep. Don't do that. Let your body adapt to the increased energy level and you'll return to a natural sleep. Just trust that your nervous system is getting just make sure you lay down and rest. Don't be up on your computer while you're not sleeping. Lay down and rest. Breathe, feel sensation, give your body rest. But you'll work through that point, and then you'll eventually be able to send that sexual energy through the whole nervous system. Again, if at any point you ejaculate, don't become discouraged and think, oh, this is too hard. I can't do this. Just get back on the horse again at another point and just keep revisiting it incrementally. And in time, you will develop the skill.
I remember part of our container early on in the second one. Uh, I don't even know how it got there, but you randomly gave me the challenge 3 months. And at the time, I'd done month, maybe a month or so, pretty regularly would be about a month. Um, and I was like, oof, okay. And we got in a call a few weeks later, and I mentioned something about, oh, how many days? Because you did it with me with the same period of time. You're like, I don't know, man. It's always day one, which I loved. It's a great frame. It's like, yes, fully commit every day. This is the first day of the practice, regardless of whether you went over or not.
Yeah. Always treat every day like day one.
It's probably a pretty good practice for life too. Justin, I so appreciate you taking the time to be here. Is there anything you want to share with people, how they can find you, or anything else before we sign off?
Yeah, my website, justinpatrickpierce.com, has got everything. London and I, we do 4 in-person events each year for men and women, singles and couples. If you want to come work with us in person, do partner practices. We have online classes, men's call, women's call, and then a couples practice evening call we do. And that's through Patreon, patreon.com/yoga of intimacy. So you could check out our online classes there. But I always recommend one of the greatest places to start is just check out our book, Playing with Fire, The Spiritual Path of Intimate Relationship. You can get the book on Amazon, or you can do the audio book on Amazon or Audible. But that book will really give you a deep understanding of what this work is about, and loads of practices you can start on your own. We really wrote the book such that if you never met me or worked with me, you would have everything that you would need to implement this work into your life and develop a strong practice.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I can vouch for that. The book is excellent. Justin, yours and London's work is profound. I'm so glad you're here putting out into the world. I'm so glad we found you. Thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for joining me today.
It's an honor, brother.